Few movies have ever been so pleasantly perplexing as 2010's Inception. The storyline of a squad of criminals lucratively exploiting minds by entering dreams within dreams left audiences both scratching their heads and vigorously debating the film's meaning, long after the top stopped or didn't stop spinning. Perhaps the greatest puzzler of the entire flick was how they managed to warp gravity in one of the most mind-boggling fight sequences of all time. Today on Art of the Scene, Christopher Nolan's hallway dream fight from Inception. Hot off the success of The Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan had Hollywood on a string by directing a superhero film that generated Oscar buzz along with over $1 billion at the global box office. The man had serious juice. He used it to do the unthinkable, get a studio to greenlight a $160 million budget for an original screenplay on an original concept. No pre-existing intellectual property like a comic book, no audience pre-awareness like a sequel, just Warner Brothers making a fat, all-in bet on Nolan's vision. This precedent had somewhat been established with Nolan's follow-up effort after Batman Begins, 2006's The Prestige. However, that film, about two magicians trying to out-illusion each other, cost approximately $40 million, or 1/4 of the budget of Inception's mega tentpole price tag. It's likely the mind-bending thriller would never have been made if Warner Brothers hadn't already been familiar with the project. Back in 2002, Nolan pitched it to them after completing Insomnia. The executives were keen on the idea, and he told them he would come back in a few months with the script. Instead, it took him 8 years.
It wasn't like he wrote it 8 years ago and then it just sat in a drawer untouched. Every couple of years, at the end of every movie, he would go back to it and tweak a little bit and think a little bit more.
It's easy to see why. Not only is the concept of thieves using dream infiltration to pull off corporate espionage one of the more convoluted in recent memory, but the script is layered with typical Nolan-esque cleverness, such as the first letters of each main character's names spelling out dreams pay. With the script completed, Leonardo DiCaprio signed on to lead, and the budget approved, it was time to actually make Nolan's dreams a reality. For this, he turned to many of his collaborators from previous projects, foremost amongst them his frequent director of photography, Wally Pfister.
Wally Pfister, my director of photography, is a tremendous creative ally in terms of how the story is going to unfold visually.
The two had met during the Sundance Slamdance film festivals back in 1999 and first teamed up on Memento in the year 2000. From the start, Pfister found it challenging to figure out how to lens Nolan's creativity. There are always scenes in a Chris Nolan script where I'm wondering how we're going to pull it off, going all the way back to Guy Pearce shooting Joe Pantoliano in the head in Memento. However, no set piece from Memento, The Prestige, or the Batman trilogy would prove quite so difficult to pull off as the showstopper Nolan had in mind for Inception, the hallway dream fight. Further complicating matters was Nolan's famous anti-digital stance. One of the few remaining purists, Nolan still shoots on film, flatly refuses to shoot in 3D, and chooses practical effects over CGI. That means that defying gravity wasn't going to be rendered pixel by pixel on Apple server clusters by a special effects wizard, but rather by over 500 crew members in real life.
It was very much the sort of grand scale physical effect that I think can make an action film go to that next level.
Traditionally, zero-gravity movie scenes, such as those in Apollo 13, had been shot on a NASA-issue KC-135A airplane nicknamed the Vomit Comet, for disgusting, obvious reasons. The plane would take off at a 45-degree angle, then taper off at the top of its elliptical arc, resulting in about 25 seconds of weightlessness. However, Nolan didn't just need weightlessness, he needed the ability to rotate gravity like a god. For this, Nolan and his production army returned to the friendly confines of the Cardington Sheds in Bedfordshire, where he had filmed set pieces for Batman Begins and The Dark Knight.
Oh, you made it. I'm so thrilled.
Nolan teamed up with special effects supervisor Chris Corbould and production designer Guy Hendricks Dias to crack the riddle of how to shoot a 100-foot rotating hotel corridor. Ever the film aficionados, Nolan and company took cues from Kubrick's 2001 and decided to use a massive centrifuge for the task at hand. The special effects team then engineered 7 steel I-beam rings set every 16 feet along the hallway. These were connected to massive roller wheels of 30 feet in diameter. Each of those wheels was then linked to 2 55-horsepower electric motors, approximately the same horsepower as your standard 1960s motorcycle. All of these motors were then synced to a computerized system that would control both the speed and the direction of the revolution, clockwise or counter. The entire rig had to be incredibly precise. If a single wheel lagged behind another, it would result in vibrations that would rattle the walls, flicker the lights, or worse, shear the set like an inverted tornado, killing America's sweetheart Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
I love that. There's no substitute for real human energy and performance. That was the most fun. It was the most challenging and the most fun.
Maintaining quality control over such a massive set was the challenge of a lifetime. But as Corbould said in his production notes, "I've built revolving sets before, but nothing as big or as fast." With the construction complete, Nolan's team turned to the issue of lighting. Because every square inch of the topsy-turvy set would be seen on camera by the audience, Wally Pfister couldn't utilize a typical approach to lighting and camera placement. So all of the lighting for the scene was built into the hallway. Every wall fixture and sconce wasn't just decoration, they were essential practical illumination. Camera placement was an even more complex challenge. In order to track the motion of the hall, the camera had to be placed on a crane and suspended in the middle via a telescoping arm. However, in order to track the motion of the actors in such a way that it appeared gravity was being warped, the cameras had to be locked down onto the set itself. This was done in order to maintain a frame of reference consistent with the dimensions of the hallway. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, the main star of the scene, rehearsed for 2 weeks prior to shooting, including physical training, wire work, combat, and familiarizing himself with the revolving corridor. In order to stay attuned to the cadence of his rotating geography so he could hit his marks with his fight choreography, he would quietly repeat Bach to himself in his head. Nolan and veteran stunt coordinator Tom Struthers attempted to navigate the rotating hallway to see what they were putting their star through, but they quickly became motion sick from the shifting frames of reference. However, Levitt figured out a solution to this queasy predicament.
It looks like we're jumping on the ceiling and stuff. In order to actually get it done, I couldn't think of it that way. I had to think of it as, this is the ground. Okay, now this is the ground. Okay, now this is the ground.
Levitt described shooting the hallway portion of the scene as being the most physically taxing of the movie. However, when they shot the portion in which he and his attacker crash into the hotel room for the climax, he was technically in greater danger. This set was an entirely new rig, similarly constructed with the same centrifugal orientation as the hallway, but with wider and non-uniform dimensions. Unlike the 8-foot width of the corridor, the room was 25 feet long on one side, which meant 25 feet to drop and crash into the set if he mistimed his move. Like the hallway set, the hotel room was designed to rotate at 6 revolutions per minute, but after an initial test with stuntmen, it was determined this would have to be modified in the name of safety and sanity. Since there was one long side and one short side to the room, the stunt coordinator settled on cranking up to near full speed when the actors were fighting on the short side and gearing down on the long side to give them more time to work their way across the 25-foot expanse. When it came time to edit, Lee Smith got to sit back and relax for the first part of the sequence, as it plays out largely in one shot. We did elect to play it in one shot simply because our immediate response when you first see the footage is it just doesn't look possible. However, when the scene ended up in the hotel room, where it was far more dangerous for Joseph Gordon-Levitt to shoot, Lee Smith's edits come fast and furious, likely to hide the fact that his stunt double tagged him out in a few of the more precarious setups. All in all, the Inception hallway dream fight sequence took over 3 weeks to shoot, which is staggering when you consider that in the script, it was merely a paragraph and a half at the bottom of page 114. It only accounts for about 30 seconds of total screen time, and it didn't even include Leonardo DiCaprio, the marquee actor in the film. Per usual, Chris Nolan turned all traditional Hollywood studio logic upside down, along with everything else.
Something, isn't it?
Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed Art of the Scene this week. Honestly, Christopher Nolan is a director I sort of have a love-hate relationship with, but I can't argue with the fact that he puts everything behind his movies, and looking at this scene from Inception sort of gave me a new appreciation for what he does as a filmmaker. Are there any filmmakers that are like that for you, that you're like, I'm kind of on the fence about, but you really appreciate the process? Let us know in the comments below. Subscribe to Cinefix if you haven't already, and come back next time for more Art of the Scene.